as you know what it is, and this is something that I've talked about sometimes too, is that if you try to jump to the solution before having the dialogue and that hospitality component with the guest, you're treating service recovery like it's a vending machine. Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman, founder of BackLooper. I help attractions collect guest feedback and identify top priorities needed for improvement.
And I'm Matt Heller, founder of Performance Optimist Consulting. I help leaders lead so they can increase employee engagement and retention.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's fantastic, Josh. How are you?
I am also doing fantastic. I'm actually very excited today.
Why would that be?
Well, if you couldn't tell by the introduction to the podcast, which has changed a little bit, I have something very exciting to announce.
You do, and yes, the intro has changed, and if you stick around, the outro has changed too.
Ooh, can't wait to hear what that's like. But anyway, I have been working on something for quite a while. It's actually, I would say, an evolution of a project I've been working on for over 6 years now. And I am officially launching this today as a product service company to serve the attractions industry. Hospitality, tourism, recreation, leisure, anything under that umbrella. Because today, the date that this podcast has gone up is September 1st, 2020, and BackLooper has been launched to the industry as the product that helps to improve consumer analytics. And I'm very excited to make this announcement today.
I feel like there should be confetti or pyro or something that went along with that. Like when you said BackLooper, we should have done something like that. Like if we were live on a stage and you were doing this big launch and stuff, I think, something like that would have been really appropriate for that.
So let's review our special effects budget and make sure we can get that in. Maybe some pyro, some loud noises, a burst, or whatever it is. But this is a very exciting time.
Yes, absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about the change happening here, because you're not going to be with Amusement Advantage anymore. Is that correct?
That is correct. So yes, so BackLooper was initially presented as an Amusement Advantage product under the umbrella. As many people know, I came on board with Amusement Advantage about 5 years ago, right around this time. It was actually September of 2015 where I came on full-time as the Director of Business Development to build out the company's consulting division and to help just drive the mystery shop program forward. And all of that came to life very quickly. It evolved. I put together a number of different services, guest experience training programs, feedback analysis, while also at the same time helping build, continually enhance, and really oversee all sales for mystery shop portion of the company. And around sometime around last year, around the middle of last year, I took a consulting service that I had been working on for quite a while and serving a number of different clients throughout the industry, and started to put together to say, all right, what can we do to really kind of take this to the next level? And that is how BackLooper came about. And when looking at it, realizing that, okay, with several new components that are being added onto it, that it has the ability potentially to stand on its own. And so now what I am doing is really taking this opportunity to drive full force into making BackLooper become as good as it potentially can be. And so with that in mind, I do want to point something out as one small disclaimer here, just in case anybody is wondering. This is by no means whatsoever a a competing or alternate product to, say, a mystery shop program. It very much complements the existing mystery shop program that Amusement Advantage has had for close to 25 years now, serving exclusively the attractions industry. And so that has been one thing that has been very important for me, as well as for Scott with Amusement Advantage, that we both make sure that this is something that complements each service, each product very seamlessly, rather than competing against it. So what we've noticed, over the last several years, and I've been talking about this, a lot, whether it's through podcasts or blog posts or at industry trade shows, to say there are a number of different pillars of when we're looking at specifically data collection as it relates to guest experience. And each one of those pillars has certain attributes that perhaps the other ones aren't able to provide as well. And then with that said, each one of them also has gaps that each one of those other ones can fill. So for example, when you're looking at, let's talk about mystery shops, it is an in-depth, very detailed evaluation of the guest experience that provides this incredibly thorough overview of that guest's experience on that day, at that time, with those staff members they interacted with. And it's polished, it's edited, it comes with specific information as to why points may have been taken off, pictures that supplement certain areas that need improvement, and it's that moment in time. And the other thing it can do is really get very granular into a lot of your specific guest experience standards and everything that revolves around that standpoint to measure your guest experience. Because it is very granular, it is able to measure so many things that most other guest experience measurement methods are not able to do. So being able to say, well, what percentage of time are staff members wearing name tags, or how often are they upselling or not upselling or offering VIP or membership or whatever it is. Mystery shopping is really the only type of solution that is able to do that. Now we bring in BackLooper into the fold, and what BackLooper does is it's able to get say more feedback from more guests. So you're able to get within the same period of time, rather than having, anywhere from 1 to 4, reports per month, or guests that are supplying this information, you're able to get substantially more. Now, the amount of data, the amount of information that is provided with each guest is going to be substantially less. It might be a few sentences, it might be a couple paragraphs. In some cases, it's been a couple of words, but even that micro level of detail, we're able to extract that, and we're able to quantify that and be able to really aggregate it over time to be able to help identify, all right, what is it that are some of the most pressing concerns going on throughout the course of this time frame, whether it's weeks or months or quarters or years or whatever it is. You can then take that information that you get from BackLooper and say, all right, over the last 3 months, wait time and crowds have been, some of our highest concerns. Let's go look at the narratives in the mystery shops to see what was provided in detail from those shoppers, to be able to say, all right, these were concerns that we had during, this particular time, and say, all right, well, what day of the week was this mystery shop done? Oh, it was on a Saturday in July. Okay, well, here's another one that says, there were no wait times, there were no crowds. Oh, this was on a Tuesday in September, or whatever it is, to be able to cross-reference and say, all right, we're getting information from this source, we're getting information from this source. You can layer in several others. If you've got survey kiosks, like if you're working with Avius, all that data is able to come into it as well. Bring in your online reviews from all your channels. If you got TripAdvisor, Facebook reviews, Google reviews, and being able to look at all of that together and seeing which is the core unique attribute that each of those bring to the table, and being able to now fill in gaps that each of them supply. So that, in a nutshell, is why the products go very well together. And even though BackLooper has been separated off, it's now operating as a separate company. It still, is something that goes quite seamlessly with Amusement Advantage's mystery shop program. And I know that was a little bit of a mouthful there.
That's okay. No, that's okay. I think it really shows how they are complementary. Like when you said you can see the trends in BackLooper and then look at the mystery shop to find out, more specifically what was going on that particular day or during that particular time period. So can you talk a little bit about how that BackLooper data is collected? Like, where is it coming from? How do people see it? Like, what's that mechanism look and sound like?
Sure, absolutely. So that might vary based on your type of operation. That a zoo might be a little bit different from a trampoline park. That might be different from a theme park and another family entertainment center or something like that. So the best way that we are able to get guests to BackLooper is going to be the most effective way. And so we're putting together multiple different avenues to be able to do that. For instance, a lot of people are doing time ticketing and they require reservations now. So that's really driving a lot of purchases online, which means you're capturing an email address, and that email address is assigned with a specific ticket that is being scanned on a specific date and time. So we're able to set up that email automation that goes out to the guest maybe 24 hours after their visit, that asks for their feedback and sends them to BackLooper. If, let's say, that isn't the case, the majority of your business is walk-up, what we can do is a number of things that perhaps it's on their receipt. A lot of places will put a survey link at the bottom of a receipt, and I think that used to kind of be the standard practice for receipt-based surveys. Nowadays, QR codes have just made a huge surge, and they've been around for a while, but they've gotten a lot of attention very recently. Let's say at restaurants, you go in the entire menu just needs to be pulled up through a QR code. So people are becoming more comfortable and more familiar, as well as smartphone technology being able to adapt to it more seamlessly. That we're able to use QR codes if, let's say, we can't necessarily capture their data immediately. So email, integrating with your existing CRM and incorporating QR codes, some of the best ways that we're able to gather a lot of feedback from a lot of guests.
And so what do operators do with this data once they get it? Like, what's that look like for them? And then they say, oh, what do I do?
Right, exactly. So two-step approach, or two-pronged approach, I would say, because they kind of go in different avenues. The first is responding to that, which is where we are talking to the guest directly. And the second is reacting to that. So that's where we want to turn that focus internally and say, all right, well, what do we actually need to do from an operation standpoint, from a business standpoint, to use the feedback to be able to make the business better? So, from the first part, responding to it is really getting back in touch with that guest. And you want to respond to as much feedback as possible, ideally all of it if you can. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, about some of the best ways to do that. And if there was a complaint, then we need to go into complaint resolution. If they left a positive comment, we want to share appreciation for them leaving that positive comment. The second piece of it being the react. That's where we look at more long-term strategy. So now we're looking at all this data, especially if we now have a month's worth of data combined that is able to really show some of the top priorities. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that maybe wait time and crowds could be some of the top concerns that guests presented. That's just a couple of examples. It could be price, it could be service, it could be cleanliness, it could be condition, it could be concerns related to COVID. So it could be cleanliness and health and sanitation and crowds. It could be about your hours of operation. One of the cool things with BackLooper is because of the way that we collect the feedback and because of ways that we let guests identify what's important to them, is we're able to measure so many more KPIs than most other survey programs or most other guest surveys are able to. If you send them out and say, rank all these, or were you satisfied with, X, Y, Z? Because we are using a lot of open-ended feedback and being able to extract out the specific key points that guests are bringing up on their own. So we're finding like 75 or so different parameters that can be measured, different KPIs that can be measured, cross-referenced across multiple locations, tracked over time, and really giving a lot of incredibly useful data back to the operator to say, this is the most pressing concern that our guests are having now that we now need to put systems in place to correct.
And it sounds like this system is something that, once it's kind of up and running, I don't want to say it's automatic or automated, but it's something that, keeps the data coming so that people can continue to make those decisions and change their operation should they need to on an ongoing basis.
For sure. It absolutely should be as ongoing and evergreen as possible. When we're talking about things like optimizing your feedback loop, which is kind of one of the phrases I've been saying a lot lately, that it shows that this is not a one-time event. That a feedback loop requires continual flow of feedback coming in, processed in certain chunks or analyzed in certain chunks, and then within that next time frame of making improvements. And then when you get that next chunk of data that's come in through the analysis, that you're able to say, all right, did the improvements that we made, were they actually impactful? Did the scores go back up, or are they still staying low, or are they still top concerns that guests have?
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about those chunks of data just for a little bit, because I know you've been working on some really great strategies on how to maximize what we do with that data and how to make sure we're handling it correctly. So I think you've got 7 points on the best way to get the most information out of that data. So I'd love to kind of jump into that if you're ready to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm very glad you did. So I've put together this little checklist here that is a 7-step checklist for getting the most out of your guest feedback. And this really has to do a lot with the response component of it. So this really is about driving guest engagement through feedback. And so with that said, I'd be happy to walk through this 7-point list here.
Okay, fantastic. I think the first one is to designate a person or team to make sure that they're focused on this.
Yeah. So let me start this off with a little stat here that I found recently, and that's 42% of businesses, and this is not necessarily the attractions industry, but this is just general. 42% of businesses do not have any type of feedback collection or guest survey program. So with that said, they do not need to designate a person or team, because they either know everything there is to know, they're assuming what their guests or customers are saying, or they don't care. That's part of it. So that's a really important piece of it to really acknowledge, that there are so many businesses out there that aren't actively collecting feedback. And maybe that's why they don't have that person or team to say, we don't need a person or team because we're not getting enough feedback to have it, or we don't need that much feedback, which is why we're not getting it. And to both of those, I recommend the opposite is that even if, and this is something, I had someone tell me not too long ago, they said, our business is very simple. We don't think we're going to learn anything if we get more guest feedback. Now, whether I agree with that that's one conversation, because I think that you can always learn something no matter how simple your business is. But the other piece of it too is, if you're not doing it for your own learning, do it for your guests. Because when guests have the opportunity to provide that feedback, then they engage in a stronger relationship with the organization. That's going to lead to longer term retention and repeat visitation and word of mouth and loyalty. So having that designated person or team that could fall under your guest services umbrella. In some cases, this might fall under marketing. It's very much a blur between the two, because this could be the same person that's responding to TripAdvisor and to social media posts. But having that designated person or team eliminates distractions. So if you are picking up the phone while at the same time you're ringing guests up in the register, you really can't devote 100% of your time to either one of them, because it's divided. So really, both guests in that scenario are being underserved. Now, yes, this might be an additional line item in your labor budget, but having that gives that opportunity to foster those guest relationships. And if there was a guest complaint that needs to be addressed, then they've got the opportunity to jump in and be able to do that in a timely manner that resolves it before it could damage your reputation through negative online reviews. And there's another stat right there that I'll give, that one negative review can turn away up to 30 possible guests who now you've just lost that revenue. Now, we're in the attractions industry. People don't usually visit attractions by themselves. So I look at that 30 and I think, most places have an average party of 3, so that's really 90, right? So multiply that by your ticket price, or at least by your per cap, by number of months of the year that you operate, and that's what one negative review is going to cost you, which is probably going to be more than the annual salary or annual wages for one person. Now, maybe you're getting more than one negative review a month. That's going to warrant more and more guests, more and more staff members on that team. So having that designated person or team allows you to show that you are committed to not just getting guest feedback, but really serving guests before, during, and after their visit.
So I want to back up just for a second, because I agree with you that people need to be, eliciting this guest feedback so that they have a better understanding of what their guests are saying. Is there a danger, though, for those companies that may have that attitude of, I don't need any more feedback, but okay, I'll go ahead and ask it because it's going to make the guests feel better? Is there a danger in asking for that feedback and then never doing anything with it? For example, if somebody says, hey, your restrooms are nasty, and they keep giving that feedback because you've asked them, but year after year, your restrooms are still nasty, it sounds like you're not listening to them. So I'm curious about, is that a danger?
Well, you're not listening to them and you're not optimizing your feedback loop. You're not making those improvements that are necessary to the operation. But, when you think about it, another stat is that 1 out of 26 guests who have a complaint, or customers, this is, again, not industry specific, 1 out of 26 of those are actually going to complain, which means that nearly 96% of guests who are dissatisfied in some way aren't going to. And if you look at reasons why guests don't complain, one of the top reasons is exactly what you mentioned, which is, I don't think it's going to be worth anybody's time. I don't think that they're going to do anything with the information. Right. So you need to have that react component of your feedback loop to say, hey, we're not just getting feedback and putting out fires, but we are fireproofing the business for this type of complaint. So that, if we've got that restroom issue, we got a ton of restroom complaints in May. Let's really drive forward to make sure that we don't get any in June, but we're going to keep collecting that feedback. We're not blocking any complaints for coming in. If the restroom's dirty, we want to know, but we want to put systems in place and be proactive so that guests are going to come back and be like, your restrooms were spotless, and put that on TripAdvisor. Exactly.
So one of the other things I know you talk a lot about, and this I think relates to having a person or a team, is to be able to respond quickly. So talk to us a little bit more about how important that is.
Sure. So I posted this blog post a couple of years ago that said something like a negative review online is like a gallon of milk in a heat wave. Like, it's like you better get it off the porch like pretty quickly, right? Otherwise, it's just gonna fester and get gross pretty quickly. And that's true for online reviews, but it's true for internal feedback too. That if you have someone who is dissatisfied and they reach out, every single day that goes by, they're not forgetting about it, unless they're just forgetting about you entirely. By being able to respond quickly, you're able to really capture the guest, hopefully before they post a negative review. You can't stop a guest from posting a negative review online, but if you're collecting feedback through an internal channel, which is what BackLooper aims to do, which is what it helps you do, that you're able to get those notifications and you're able to get to the guest in a very timely manner. And if you can do that within 24 hours, then you're going to be seen as a rock star to the guest. One of the features that I've implemented into BackLooper is that if a guest is specifically a detractor, meaning they are not going to recommend your business to friends and family, we're going to send a text message, not to the guest, but to whether it's that designated person or team, if it's the manager, director, guest services, whatever it is, that as soon as that guest submits that feedback, you get a notification saying, hey, there's a complaint that you just can't that just came in. And
Mhm.
from, let's say, if you've got your company issued cell phone, you've got the guest phone number right there. You can respond within 10 seconds of that complaint if you get that text notification
Wow.
right away. So yeah, responding quickly is something that is not only going to help solve the problem, but is really going to show the guest that you are committed to solving a problem. Now, if the guest provided positive feedback, a rave review, you still want to respond. But you can do it with a little bit less urgency. You definitely don't want to forget about it altogether, because if someone, let's say they provide an awesome review on TripAdvisor, that's marketing for you. If the guest comes back to TripAdvisor to see if you've responded to it, and you've just responded to all the complaints that are around it, it's important to respond to those complaints. You have to. I can talk all day about how to properly respond to a TripAdvisor review, but even just a simple thank you to that person, whether it's online or whether it's through an internal channel, to be able to just show appreciation for that feedback.
Speaking of appreciation, you work that in well.
Leads us to our third point.
Exactly. Yeah. Which, reminds me of how you adjust the last model, which is, I know, something that a lot of people use, which is listen, apologize, solve, and thank. And you insert the another thank right after the L. So it makes sense that you're suggesting that we show appreciation early on in this process. So, having the team in place is great. Responding quickly, I would imagine part of that quick response is to show some sort of appreciation.
Yeah. So if we go back to that, 1 out of 26 people who are dissatisfied aren't going to complain. You want to take that one who does and really show them that you are very glad that they gave you feedback. Because for that one person, there's 25 others who are walking around talking to people, posting on social media about the complaint that they may have had, when they should have given that complaint to you for you to be able to do something about it. And again, this goes for both positive and negative. If someone is bringing you positive feedback, this, I don't have to convince you, Matt, is one of the best employee motivators that you can have. So being able to use positive feedback, positive comments, especially if they are related to a specific employee at a specific time. Matt at the go-karts on Tuesday night, he wasn't giving me high fives, but he was waving and he was smiling through his mask. I could see his cheekbones through the mask. His eyes lit up. He was just awesome. You get that feedback, and you want to thank your staff. You also want to thank your guest for providing that feedback and for inviting them back again to be able to hopefully have as great of an experience. But yeah, as far as thanking guests for complaints as well, it sounds kind of counterintuitive as far as saying, well, why are we thanking people for complaining? Well, most people don't complain. And now, because they did complain, you've got the opportunity to resolve their situation. And one of the things that I mentioned on our recent webinar is I have always said, and this is long before COVID, that thanking a guest and expressing appreciation for feedback, even if the guest is angry, even if they are on fire, is one of the best de-escalation techniques you can use. Because the guest comes to fight, right? If the guest is that angry, they are there to really just tell you how angry they are. And if you say, thank you so much for telling me this, you've completely thrown them off course. And now they say, oh, Matt's not here to argue with me. Matt might actually be the one who's able to help me. So they start to calm down a little bit. It's like asking someone to calm down without asking them to calm down.
Because that never works.
Right.
The two words that you should never use when you want somebody to calm down is calm down.
I saw a meme once that was like, at no point in the history of calming down did someone calm down by being told to calm down.
Calm down. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that really falls in line with your next point in terms of what do you do now, right? You've thanked them, you've shown appreciation. So now how do you go about either solving their problem or resolving it, or, making sure you're recovering that service?
Sure. So now you've got the opportunity to use proven complaint resolution strategies. And for that, I would go back one podcast episode to to our de-escalation webinar, where I talked about the last model and the LATAST model. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about it many times on the podcast too, and written a number of articles on it as well. And in a quick nutshell, listen, thank, apologize, solve, and thank. Show the guest it's using that appreciation as the overarching emotion that you have for being able to resolve their issue. Listening to them and validating their concerns, letting the guest be right, even if they're wrong, which can sometimes be very tough to do, but it allows you to open up the door for that conversation. Thanking them for complaining, saying that most guests don't complain when they have a bad experience. Going into the apologizing for the effect of what happened, not for the cause. So saying, I'm so sorry that this impacted your experience, not, I'm so sorry that we have this policy where you have to wear a mask. That is a little counterintuitive to the goal we want to achieve. Solving it through effective resolution, techniques, as far as making sure you're giving them something, and that something can be information, that something can be your time, that something can be your appreciation for their business, or it can be something that has value to the guest. And that's one thing that I love about our industry, is that we have so many things that we tie a dollar amount to that has a value to guests that cost the business next to nothing, or oftentimes nothing. So if we can get to the guest to, the front of a ride, or, the backstage at an exhibit, or, just an escort to, this area over here, sometimes it's a free ice cream cone. Something like that is going to be such a minimal cost that has such a maximum gain with it. If that guest is satisfied, now we go into thanking them again as the final point, which is really the follow through of the resolution process. So by using that complaint resolution strategy, we're able to really use that feedback to show the guest that we care and make the guest satisfied again.
Absolutely. And when you talk about listening, that's one of the big ways that you show guests that you care. And I've seen a lot of these different acronyms, right? There's LAST, there's your LATAST, there's LEAST, there's LEAP. I've seen that one. But they all start with listening, right? And what I think is also interesting is that, you don't get to the solve portion until you're a couple of steps in, where I think one of the big mistakes I know I made as a new manager, and I've seen a lot of people make, is they jump right in trying to solve it. But if you really don't know what that guest is saying, and you don't know if that guest just needs to vent, right? And then all the solving in the world, could be just you listening, right? It could be you acknowledging that there's some sort of issue, and they're like, oh, all right, I'm good now, right? And they may not need anything.
I completely 100% agree, and have talked about that too, especially when I put up, LATAST on a PowerPoint, and I say solving it is step 4 in a 5-step process, and this must be done in order. And I can think of several times as well where I've jumped straight to the solution, wanting to be the hero, and the guest is like, what is this? Like, why are you doing, it comes across as, what it is. And this is something that I've talked about sometimes too, is that if you try to jump to the solution before having the dialogue and that hospitality component with the guest, you're treating service recovery like it's a vending machine. The guest comes in, inserts their complaint, and they get the solution coming out of it. And it's a transactional exchange. And it just doesn't result in that satisfaction of being able to actually foster that relationship and engage with the guest, so that they're not just satisfied by having the thing that solves the complaint, but that they had the experience with it. And when they have that, there's something called the recovery paradox, where service levels for guests or customers in a wide variety of industries who have experienced some sort of service failure and have gone through this process, their level of satisfaction can be higher, is oftentimes higher than those who came in through and had a satisfactory experience as it is.
So I want to go back to your vending machine analogy just for a second, because what I pictured was, somebody, they go up to it, they put their complaint in it, in the machine, and they hit the right number, right? And then it gets stuck. The candy, the solution, it's like they're banging on it, right? To me, that's the equivalent of not listening, not apologizing, not thanking, right? Because then you have somebody that's potentially more frustrated and more upset than they would have been if you had done those steps in the first place.
For sure. Absolutely. It comes across as inauthentic when you have the opportunity to really bond with the guest from that standpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know the next step is actually something that we talk about in employment circles as well when it comes to, employee behavior and making sure that we have, the right things in place to focus on performance management and performance evaluations. And that's to document.
Was that 6 times? That was 7 times.
I don't know.
Enough to get the point across.
Enough to either good.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that is so crucial because you ever notice that sometimes people can be maybe repeat offenders, or maybe they get used to the compensation, so they start to figure out your next move, and they might come back and they might just repeatedly make the same complaint because they know that they're going to get the same compensation. That is one of the reasons to document. So you're able to track that, and you're able to say to a guest, you know what, Matt, looks like you were here last year at this exact time for this same event that we had, and you complained about, your cotton candy was stale, and we gave you a coupon for a free cotton candy, even though you came with just the wand and you ate all the cotton candy already. And I'm obviously completely making this up, but, and now you see, we're asking that again, curious, what is it that we can do to make sure that, we can minimize this complaint for you in the future? See what you're doing there is you're using the documentation to be able to still have that service mindset for the guest, but in a way you're also kind of showing them that you know the type of feedback that they've been leaving. That's one of the reasons for documenting. It's also for the purpose of tracking the compensation that you're giving and tracking the communication and the conversation and correspondence, especially if you have more than one person. If you have a team that's overseeing this, that more than one staff member would be able to help them. If you have if you have a guest who calls and they get me and I take down their file and I start working on it, and I call and leave a voicemail and they call back and they get you, Matt, that, if I'm off that day or if I'm on vacation or whatever it is, you should be able to provide the same level of service as they were with that original team member. So having that full documentation and that paper trail of all of this guest feedback is best to serve the guest. And by documenting all of this, you now have this historical record really from an objective standpoint of what is the type of feedback that you've been getting. What are the KPIs that are being measured? Was it stale cotton candy? Was it price? Was it service? Was it quality? Was it enjoyability? Was it entertainment value? Whatever it was, that you've got a better tracking of whatever it is that you need to know to be able to make your experience better for the future.
I would also think all that documentation would help organizationally, because you can now track not only the things that their guests are saying, but you can say, okay, is the cotton candy really stale? And if that's the case, we need to go back and fix it for good, right? That's kind of how I look at this, right? You fix it in the moment, right? You get the person a new cotton candy or, some sort of recovery, but then you have to fix it for good. And that might be, replacing your stock more often if it's cotton candy or whatever the case may be. In a lot of places I've worked, there's been inconsistencies with height measurements. And I know we've gotten a lot better as an industry recently. But there was the old PVC pipes that got worn down on the end, and all of a sudden somebody was tall enough. Yes, exactly. And, that was ripe for all kinds of complaints. So, and yes, we have to fix it in the moment, but then we have to go back and say, did we really measure that child properly? And if not, then we have some work to do. So I love that documentation piece, because I think that helps us in so many different ways.
I have another example too, if you'd like to hear it.
Of course.
This one has to do with magic wands. And this goes back to Actually, back when you and I were working together, but not really working together because we were on opposite sides of the property, and we would see each other more at IAPA, but we both worked at Universal at the
That's
same
right.
time. And we were both there during the opening of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, the first time, the Hogsmeade side at Islands of Adventure. And one of the hottest retail items when Harry Potter opened were wands. They were like $30. There's the whole Ollivander experience. The wand chooses the wizard, and then it's, they call it retail theater, whatever it is. Wands were flying off the shelves, and a lot of adults were buying them, but a lot of, parents were also buying them for their children as well. At the time, I was in the guest communications team at Universal, and amongst a wide variety of other feedback we were getting, we were also getting shipments of wands directly to our office that were snapped in half, that we needed to then go over to Ollivander's and literally swap them out and ship it to the guest. And there was this whole, there was service recovery, and then it really put a lot of friction on our team, because if I'm out of the office going over to, to do this retail exchange, and I'm gone for, 45 minutes, those are emails and phone calls that the team is short one person, basically, because they're in the interest of serving a guest. And what would happen was, as we're documenting it, we realized that most of these wands that were broken were for children, maybe 2 children that got 2 wands. And immediately after taking them out of the box, when they got home, they went from wands to being lightsabers, and they would just snap in half. Now, there was a label on the box that said "not a toy," but it was there subtly, right? They wanted it would take away a lot of the majesty of the product if it was like written all over the entire box, "not a toy." Probably would have saved a lot of wands from being broken, but it wouldn't have, it would have taken away from the theming, if you will. So the more we documented this, the more we were able to put this into weekly reports that went out to executives and department heads all over, where I think I even put one time in paragraph format, I said, our office is getting a ton of wands back every single day that we are replacing, that, guests are not really paying attention to the "not a toy" label. So that label either needs to be bigger, or, something needs to happen. And once that happened, the amount of wands that came back to our office were substantially reduced, because they were able to take that documentation that piled up, and we're able to implement that into the operation. Now, I can't remember if they actually made the label bigger or not that said "not a toy," but now you can actually take the staff and you can communicate that with the retail team, who wasn't in the guest communications office. They weren't seeing what happened after they sold a wand and the guest walked away, but they were able to get that information of being like, oh, guests really need to know this at the point of purchase, to say, hey, I'm going to show you the box and I'm going to point out where it says "not a toy." Maybe even look at the kid, just say, hey, just letting you know, this is for waving and for casting spells. This is not for, trying to open a jar of pickles, or, this is not for beating your friends with, or whatever it is. Once that was put in place from the operational standpoint, we obviously continued to document it, didn't go away completely, but it substantially reduced, which not only made guests more satisfied because they didn't have to go through the hoops of shipping a wand back to Orlando and us shipping it back, but also there's the actual cost of doing that as well. That, the cost of those wands that we had to keep replacing. So we were able to actually improve efficiencies from that standpoint, from guest satisfaction, as well as something with a hard retail cost to it, because we document.
And I would also say that there's probably a positive uptick with the guest services folks, because they saw that all this feedback that they're getting is now actually enacting improvements in the operation, right? It's not just falling on deaf ears.
Yeah. And 100% of being able to notice a problem, communicate the problem, see the problem begin to be corrected, and then actually watch the data show that the problem is being fixed.
Yeah.
Problem being improved. Yeah.
And that's not a short process by any means, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, you think about going back to your investment as a guest services person, right? Your investment is you're documenting all these things. And, if you never saw improvement, you might be less likely to put as much passion into documenting that, oh, it's just another broken wand. Nothing's going to happen, right? So I think there's all kinds of effects across the board, but we're not done, are we? Like,
no, we're only 5 out of 7.
So we've documented. What's next?
The next one is follow through to completion. And this is where really now we go back to that guest service aspect of it. And, it kind of has to do with tying up the last model or the LTAST model altogether and kind of going along with this vending machine. A vending machine doesn't follow through with you to ensure that you're enjoying your candy bar or soda, right? But with any type of service recovery, or if there's compensation or guest feedback response, of really making sure that there is that overall confirmation and kind of, I would say, putting a bow on it to close out each case specifically with each guest. So just to give them that extra surge of appreciation and that recognition, rather than, the guest being like, I was so upset, I complained, and, I complained so hard they had to give me a free ticket to come back or something like that. Well, now maybe they're going to get a letter in the mail. Maybe it has that ticket, or maybe it just shows the instructions or whatever it is. And it's going to thank them again for providing that feedback. It's very much it's like the follow through of your golf swing right here. Even though you're done, you want to really drill it home with the guest of saying, I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to do this. There was an example that I shared on our recent webinar that I think is worth repeating. Several years ago, I was flying on this one specific airline, not going to say who it is, and they were very friendly. I was very, very happy with the experience until I went to baggage claim and my suitcase was not there. And I was in a different country, and they took over 24 hours to get my suitcase to me. Once it was delivered, it was completely destroyed. They tried to blame it on the courier service, and I just kept pushing back with them and fighting with them. I had to do a meeting with a client wearing shorts and flip-flops. And I said to the client, I promise you, I've got a suit in my suitcase. I was going to wear it this morning, but I don't know where my suitcase is. So they, I had to do that. And I, eventually they said, all right, we're going to give you, $50 to replace your suitcase. And I said, just to confirm, that's going to be in American currency, because I was flying on, an international airline. They said, yeah, we'll give you $50 US currency that you'll pick up, when you get back to the airport on your way back. So I went to the desk, told them my name, and they gave me $50, but it was in the currency of that country. Would have been totally fine if I was landing in the country and was going to stay there and spend that money, but I would have had to go to the currency exchange, which, I mean, what do you lose, like half of it when you're changing a currency at the airport? I was like, no, I need the full amount you promised me, because that's still not going to cover the cost of my suitcase. We went back and forth again with that, and I stood my ground, and eventually he disappears for like 5 minutes and comes back, and he gives me $50 in cash in US currency. And to be honest, at this point, I was very satisfied. I was satisfied with the resolution. I was satisfied with the service that I received before the luggage was lost. I went through that friction. The recovery paradox was about to happen with me and show my loyalty to that airline. And I said to the agent, I said, hey, I just want to say I am so thankful. I am so appreciative for you taking the time to help me out. And he goes, yeah, I bet you are. And boom, at that point, because he completely failed to follow through the resolution, it was the vending machine. It was just like spitting out, $50 for me to just get away, right? He just wanted nothing to do with me anymore. So showing that guest that last appreciation. Now, if you would have said, Mr. Liebman, I appreciate you. And once again, we are, so sorry for any inconvenience that may have been caused by the delay in getting you your luggage. And, we hope you still were able to have a successful meeting with your client, even though it was in shorts and flip-flops and a polo shirt. But hey, we're in the Caribbean, so maybe that's okay anyway. That's, it was in somewhere in the Caribbean. And, and we can't wait to see you again on a future flight. I'd say, tell me how to book right now. And I would have booked another flight.
Mm-hmm.
But it completely failed, unraveled everything that he had done up to that. So follow through to completion with your guest feedback and guest complaint resolution process.
I'll bet even if he just didn't say anything and just shook his head, it would have been better than what he said.
Yes, completely agree.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's important there too is not just the words that he said, but your tone of voice completely changed when you imitated what he said. Yeah, I'll bet you are. Right? Like he was trying to get rid of you, like just go away kind of a thing. And there's nothing more more off-putting than that, especially when you've been through all of that. So
yeah, wow. I was tired and ready to go home.
Exactly.
Get a new suitcase.
Yeah. So you've got your new suitcase, you're at home, but there's one more step that we have to cover.
Yeah. The final step is keep your promises. So this actually extends beyond the follow through to completion, because if, let's say we're talking about a guest complaint, and let's say, you've got that designated person who's responded very quickly. They have expressed appreciation. They've gone through the full LAST model and used proven complaint resolution strategies. Everything is documented for that guest to be able to get whatever is needed, perhaps on their next visit. You're following through to completion by making sure that they are completely 100% satisfied. Now, let's say, for example, Matt, I've got a food voucher for you waiting at guest services because the next time you come visit Josh's Funland, your lunch is on me for up to $30, whatever it is. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to fulfill that. And hopefully that's, in a near future. Maybe there's an expiration date on that. Maybe there's not. But when you get there, that documentation that happened need to remain, whether it's a month down the road or if it's 5-10 years down the road. If there's no expiration to it, then yeah, if you've offered it, you need to be prepared to fulfill that and be able to live up to that expectation. Because now the guest has an expectation on their next visit that not only are they going to, get the compensation that you offered, but also this now turns into that react component of it. That, we used the example earlier of the restrooms being dirty. And if you're saying, hey, we are documenting this so that we can, we can ensure that we take a closer look into this issue that you are bringing up. Yeah, if I come back and the restroom's dirty again, you kind of failed to keep the promise that you were going to do that. Mm-hmm. So keeping that promise from the standpoint of ensuring that the guest is eligible for any type of, compensation or fulfillment that you've offered them, as well as making sure that you are truly transferring this information to the appropriate channels that are able to make that type of long-term correction and improvement within the operation.
Yeah. First of all, whenever you come to Matt's amusement pier, Josh, lunch is on me. So I'm hoping that there's a reciprocal when I go to Josh's Funland for free lunch. But anyway, I definitely
you've got a voucher at guest services, no matter what.
It better be waiting for me there. But here's one thing that I think it drives home to people is that, when you had that last interaction with someone and they say, yeah, next time you come back, there's going to be this voucher here. That's something that hasn't happened yet, right? That's a future action that they are promising that they're going to take. When you come back and that voucher is there, there's this psychological effect that they were thinking of me when I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really powerful, because yes, you followed through on the promise. Yes, the voucher was there. And let's say that voucher was for you and your guests and your family. And now you're saying, I just got to go into guest services, get the voucher, and we'll be back out. Well, then you go into guest services that's not there. Then you have to explain to your friends about why this ice cream voucher or the lunch voucher wasn't there and stuff. And, that makes you feel much, much worse and maybe a little embarrassed. But there's that element that they thought of me when I wasn't here. And I think that really helps the connection and the loyalty that that you can count on them.
And there might be that anxiety leading up to that moment. of wondering, is that voucher going to be there? And
Right.
hopefully, everything is digital by now, that, the voucher's not sitting on the counter from from that day until the day you get back, that it's easily able to be retrieved and say, Mr. Heller, welcome back. We are so excited to provide this voucher for you. Give me just a moment as I, print it off and get it to you, and then you'll be on your way. I don't want to take up any more of your time than is needed. So really tying in, I always tie this back to the hospitality component of what we're doing. And it's not just, here's your voucher. Oh, I'm so appreciative. Yeah, I bet you are. Then, all of this is that continual follow through and that continual element of the appreciation that goes in with the whole process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So those are 7 steps, right, that we can use to maximize our guest feedback. And one of those, of course, is BackLooper, that can help us get some of that feedback and get some of that information. So if there was some sort of summary or tie-in that you would do with BackLooper and some of the things you just talked about, what would that be?
Sure, absolutely. So BackLooper can help you collect more of that feedback than perhaps you already are. If, let's say, you are relying on passive methods, if you are waiting for guests to call you or email you, or particularly if you're relying on comment cards or relying on online reviews. BackLooper is something that can very genuinely help you streamline that process. And then from the documentation standpoint, we're able to organize all of this data in a way that allows you to easily access, even break it down by allocation and department. So if you say, hey, I want to find, all comments that were related to attractions operations over the last year, we can find that, even break it out positive and negative, and the specific KPIs that follows those as well. So if you say, hey, I want to find all service complaints over the last 3 months, we can help with that documentation standpoint. What we can't do, and actually one of the reasons why I wanted to put together this checklist, is we can help you strengthen your relationships with your guests, but we can't strengthen those relationships for you. That's why what you can do with the information you get from BackLooper involves designating a person or team that is able to take on this ownership over guest feedback and guest communication, whether it's through BackLooper, and they can also be focusing on TripAdvisor and social media response and all of that, to make sure that you can see the highest levels of guest satisfaction post-visit that will lead to stronger word of mouth, more repeat visitation, ultimately leading to loyalty. And Matt, I don't know about you, but I think those are all things that our industry needs right now, because negative word of mouth can be even more detrimental now than it was pre-COVID. If you get a bad review about a place and say, oh, that place was dirty, maybe it was just that day, I'll go take my chance. If it's dirty, I'll complain. Now, if they say, hey, this place was not clean, was not up to standards, people weren't physically distancing, masks weren't being enforced, if that's showing up online, it's probably turning away more than 30 customers at this point. So let's reduce negative online reviews. Let's strengthen those guest relationships, and let's foster that loyalty. And by the way, you can find this checklist at backlooper.com/checklist. And just to give a quick recap of those seven steps: designate a person or team, respond quickly, express appreciation, use proven complaint resolution strategies, document, follow through to completion, and keep your promises.
That's awesome. So thank you very much for sharing those 7 points. I think there's a lot of great stuff in there that we can use with our team members as well as guests, right? In terms of if a team member has an issue, but you also mentioned a lot of crossover. One thing you mentioned, though, that I think is really critical in so many areas of business and leadership is that, you can help people gather this information, but you can't help them do something with it. Like, they still got to do something with it. So the best podcast, the best book, the best piece of data is only as good as the action you take because of it. So I think there's a really great point that just because you have mystery shopping, just because you use BackLooper, that doesn't mean you're going to have better guest service, right? You've still got to enact some operational changes potentially because of that input.
Very well said. I'm not going to call your guests on your behalf. Unless we work out an arrangement that's what it looks like. I don't know, but that's.
I think that's probably a higher level service.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me, because like I mentioned, this is something that's really exciting. And if you want to learn more, go to backlooper.com. My new email address is josh@backlooper.com. And that's BackLooper written as one word. Think feedback loop. Like I said, optimize your feedback loop. But backloop.com was taken, so I did BackLooper instead. that one day last year or so when I was looking at naming this thing. So I really appreciate it, and hopefully this was valuable information to everyone out there, because to everyone out there, as we all know, we are all attraction pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.